that today would be just as wonderful as the speech. Please help me welcome Jim.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I come before you today to talk about a serious problem that we face as people who give speeches. The challenge that we're facing right now is a challenge I like to call the challenge of technology. You might not realize it, but giving speeches is sort of a high-tech undertaking these days. In order to understand the true impact of technology on our speeches, you have to take a step back in time, okay? Before all this fancy automation and stuff like that came into our lives. If you go back to, I don't know, maybe 1700s or 1800s, people were giving speeches back then. Speaking in public is not something terribly new. It's just that the way they gave their speeches was very different from the way that we do it today. In fact, the way they did it back in the day is they'd get a box or something to stand on. They would then stand on the box, and they would proceed to spend the next half an hour, or perhaps 8 hours, who knows, yelling. Right? And could the people in the back of the room hear them? Yeah, if they were good at yelling, right? But it brings up some interesting points. You know, the size of the audience that you could address simply using the sound of your voice was clearly limited. All right? Okay? Also, for another interesting aspect, the length of time you could actually speak was also limited. We can only yell for so long. And of course, if you had any sort of physical issues, a cold or allergy, your time was probably even cut down even farther, right? So back in the day, people gave speeches. But the speeches that they gave, the impact of the speeches they were giving were relatively limited. Sort of amazing we know about Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, right? I mean, there's 5 or 6 people there to hear that? I don't know, there's more probably. But you get the gist of it, right? Famous speeches from long ago, pretty impressive that we know about them. So what changed? Well, what changed is there was an invention. It's called the microphone. Once the microphone was invented, all of a sudden the speaker standing at the front could suddenly project their voice to the back. Something else very amazing happened when the microphone was invented. All of a sudden the speaker could work a lot more inflection into their voice. They could lower their voice. They could whisper if they wanted to, right? They could do a lot of things that when you're yelling, you arguably can't, because you're trying to reach that person in the back of the room simply with the power of your voice. When all of a sudden I have a whole speaker system, now I can almost have a conversation with you. I can talk to you in a conversational tone, and you'll be able to hear what I'm saying no matter where you're sitting in the room. So this was a huge breakthrough. The next technological breakthrough in terms of speaking was the arrival of television. What's interesting about television is that television gives us the ability to have a close-up of the speaker, right? You don't think about it. We see it so often when we have politicians speaking or anybody else. I mean, it is the close-up that they go for, right? And what we don't realize today is that a close-up transforms sort of a general or broad speech potentially into almost sort of an intimate conversation between the person who's giving the speech and us. Our politicians might be addressing millions of people at home, but each one of us at home, when that camera clicks in on their face, feels like they're talking only to us. And that was a huge breakthrough. With the arrival of things like television, though, a trend started to occur in the world of speaking. All of a sudden, the people who were giving the speeches started to change their speeches to match the medium that they had. And you're very aware of what I'm going to say next, because it's all about sound bites, right? So when you see a politician or somebody who just wants you to remember what they're saying giving a speech, oftentimes they'll use some sort of phrase, and potentially over and over again in their speech, so that long after their speech is done, that phrase will be rattling around in your head and you will remember what they said, right? In the recent campaign for president, one of the phrases that was used was build a wall. build a wall, build a wall, build a wall. You say it enough, and eventually people start to say it themselves, and they associate that phrase with you. So sound bites are classically a very, very important part of getting your audience to remember what's going on. But the trick here is that you've modified your speech specifically for those sound bites, right? If we take us a little step into the current day, the question is when you're giving a speech, what is your audience doing? Well, thanks to the arrival of social media, there's a very good chance that members of your audience are listening to your speech and at the same time participating in social media. One of the more common social media types is, of course, Twitter. Now, Twitter lets people tweet about your speech while you're giving it. But the interesting thing is they can't tweet a lot, right? Twitter has a character limit of, I think, 140 characters. So what they'll be doing is they're looking at your speech, or listening to your speech, rather, and they're looking for bits and pieces that are going to fit into 140 characters that they can then tweet out. It's a little bit longer, potentially, than a soundbite, but it's still a small, let's call it, nugget of information. And once again, as a speaker, you have a potential to change your speech so that it contains more information in packets of a size that can be tweeted. So this starts to become a very interesting issue for us as speakers, okay? Because all this fantastic and wonderful technology is out there, and we have a possibility of transforming our speeches to work exclusively with that technology. And this leads to a problem, because if we get too good at doing this, the speech that we give is going to look very, very polished, right? And what's going to be removed from the speech is our human mistakes, right? Our pauses, our, when we get lost or searching for a word, all those things that turn us into humans that our audience picks up on will be smoothed out as we deliver an almost mechanical sort of speech to our audience. And when you deliver a mechanical speech, what happens is your audience does not remember what you said, right? There was no human connection during that speech. It's almost like they were reading it or they were having a robot give the speech to them. So technology is a wonderful thing. I think it has basically made our speech giving better. There's no question about that whatsoever. However, everything is a two-edged blade, right? Be very careful in how you allow technology to change the next speech that you're going to give. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Jim. You did not disappoint us.